Well, if your January was anything like mine, then I think that we can agree that no more. No more January. No more. No more Januaries ever. Illegal. Jail. I don't want to think about January ever again. The horrors persist, but so do we. And so do horror movies, actually. If you're new here, that's usually what I talk about. I am Satan's favorite daughter. I am the Antichrist. My government name is Kylie Roseanne. Sorry, just like some rapid fire fun facts, because we have a lot to get into today. Every single month, I do an entire recap of everything that I have watched. And the reason for my existence, particularly on this platform, is generally to talk about horror movies, hence my tasteful little jokes about persisting horrors. But I always start with the TV shows that I've watched in the month. I've continued with Ash vs. Evil Dead. We gotta talk about Severance, Squid Game. Then we get into non-horror, horror rewatches, new watches of old horror, and finally new horror releases. There are the rare months though where I have been playing horror video games with you guys. Lately I've been streaming Alien Isolation, which just like, mwah. Love her. I'm on the novice setting. I don't even care. I have no shame. Like, I'm having such a fun time and my viewers have been helping me out with it so much. Got a couple really good jump scares in there. I feel like I've been learning the game really quickly. The ambiance is amazing. It's just, I know I'm not saying anything new because the game is like over a decade old, but it's new to me and I'm having a blast. That will be a continuing series on this channel for probably like the next 10 weeks or so. I don't know how long it's gonna take me to finish the game, but I am really into it now, so I feel like I have to finish. Anyway, let's move on to the TV shows. Let's kick it off with Ash vs. Evil Dead. I watched season 2 in the month of January, and let me just tell you that season 2 is such a huge step up from season 1. My attention would ebb and flow with the first season. Sometimes I'd be kind of disengaged. The second season, they clearly upped the budget. The filmmaking is just so much more intense. It's so much more fun. It's a little bit more in line with the original trilogy of films. The characters get more interesting. The season 2 arc with Ash also is, I feel like, maybe the deepest we've ever gotten with his character. So I'm really, really excited for season 3. I'm gonna wrap up that show this month. Next up, we have Severance, and don't piss me off. I love this show to death, to the point that I knew the second season was coming. I made my partner watch the first season with me, and I didn't even have Apple TV at the time. We have it now, but my partner, knowing what it meant to me, he bought me the Blu-ray of the first season so that we could watch it. I love the show, okay? Love it. Love it. Tell me why nothing is happening in the second season. I'm releasing this video on a Friday, which I don't usually do on this channel, so I know that today there will be episode 4. I've watched the first 3 episodes. Okay, it's the beginning of the season. There's 10 episodes, so I shouldn't expect a whole lot all at once, but every single episode of the first season was interesting. Every episode of the first season was moving things along. Ooh, new little piece of the puzzle we can put in, and wow, look how it's contributing to the bigger picture. Now it's like, ugh. This is not a plot spoiler, just kind of a vibe spoiler, but the first season ends on this really big cliffhanger, and it was in episode 2 or 3 of the second season where they start to like pick up on that again and like pick up where that leaves off, because they did sort of like a jump into the future in the first episode, and I just felt like where they picked up on the cliffhanger was really underwhelming. It wasn't until the very end of the 3rd episode of that second season that I was like, oh my god, something interesting is happening. Oh my god, something I care about is happening. Wow, how novel. I'm really, really irked. Like, I don't know what's going on. I sincerely hope that it picks up because I love that show so much. Same thing with Squid Game. Let's move on to that. I'm not gonna get into it here because over on the Patreon, I did like a spoiler-free half and then a spoiler-filled half whole review of the second season. If you want to hear me ramble for almost 19 minutes about Squid Game, then join us over there. But I will just let you know that I had similar problems that I did with Severance. Severance doesn't have the problem of like recycling plot lines from the first season. Maybe a little bit. Like the goats, if you know, you know, and like Gwendolyn Christie popping up, like I can't, you know what? I will probably also review the entirety of season 2 of Severance over on Patreon once it concludes. So let me relax. Let's get into non-horror. His Three Daughters was actually my first watch of 2025. Started off the year on a sad note. I cried. That's because this movie follows 3 sisters and it mainly takes place all in this one location of this apartment that one of the sisters shared with their father. And it's about him being in hospice. So 3 adult women, they're all very different from one another, but they're all having to reckon with the fact that their father is dying. I found it to be extremely relatable. I have had family members pass away in home with hospice care, with, you know, family surrounding them, and it felt like it really captured that. Really great film. I thought that its purpose was like Oscar bait. I thought that that was going to be one of Netflix's like ins for the Academy Awards this year, but no. I don't know what award circuits it went through, but I thought that we were going to get, you know, like a best supporting actress maybe, maybe for Elizabeth Olsen. Anyway, it was very good. I cried. I also finished the Before trilogy, so Before Sunset and Before Midnight. I had started that last year. They're all perfect. All three of them are perfect films, but the first movie of the trilogy is more perfect than the others. I would go Before Sunrise, Before Midnight, and then Before Sunset. I know that a lot of people's least favorite of the trilogy is Before Midnight, but to me that was like the realest one. You're not in a real relationship if you're not having some like crazy ass fights like that. But at the end of the day, love is a choice, and I just, Before Midnight captured that so well. Okay, anyway, next up we have A Complete Unknown. I also don't want to talk about this one too much just because like it's getting Oscar buzz and blah blah blah. I talked about it a lot over on Patreon once again, and all the super long podcast episodes with my dad, the super long form bonus content, is available on the cheapest tier of my Patreon. By the way, we reacted to all the Oscar nominations and stuff, but A Complete Unknown, I really loved that movie. I was not familiar with Bob Dylan like at all. I had no idea just how famous he really was for a couple years there, and I just enjoyed all the music. I didn't think story-wise it was particularly strong, but Timothée Chalamet, he really drives the whole movie anyway. Great movie. Not much more to say. Scott and I also finished the Harry Potter franchise, so we watched the latter half of it. We watched Harry Potter 5 through 8. If you're new here, my partner just had never seen the Harry Potter movies, like he'd seen maybe one or two of them, so we were catching him up. Little blockbuster history lesson there. Next up we have Vamps. I watched a lot of vampire movies in the month of January. I'm not going to talk about every single one of them because I did my top 10 vampire movie list, but Vamps did not make that. Blood-sucking party girls find their destinies at stake when one falls for the son of a vampire hunter and the other encounters a long-ago love. I don't know why on Google this says the box office was $3,361. That's abysmal. But this was also directed by Amy Heckerling, who directed Clueless, actually. And it also stars Alicia Silverstone, if you didn't notice. Dan Stevens is really the only saving grace of this movie, and like the relationship between the girls is cute. Sigourney Weaver is there inexplicably delivering very like crass, unfunny comedy. Wallace Shawn is also there. It's kind of like a Clueless reunion a little bit. It's just whatever. Like, it's just not that good. There's also a moment that stands out as so bizarre. I'm gonna play you this clip, but just know that not a single other frame of the movie looks like this, operates like this, is on this level of absurdity.
I really gotta go.
When I tell you my jaw was on the floor. No, it's like, it's supposed to be a reference to the way that Dracula scales down the castle wall in the book, because I have not seen a majority of Dracula adaptations. I don't know if any of them have ever actually done that kind of like direct adaptation of how he crawls on the wall. Was it hilarious? Yes, but it tonally did not fit the rest of the movie at all. So that was wild. That was wild. Why did you do that? Let's move on. Oh, I rewatched Dirty Dancing. I hadn't seen that since I was a teenager, I think, and I love Dirty Dancing. Oh, so good. Can you believe apparently there's gonna be a sequel? At least that's what Cody Leach says. I mean, I'm sure. But King Patrick Swayze is no longer with us. I guess Jennifer Grey is returning. I don't know. I don't know if I'm gonna be here for that, because tonally, it doesn't seem like we're really in that place in cinema in the current day and age. Maybe they'll throw it back. Look, what do I know? I rewatched Now You See Me. I just think that the concept of this movie is so awesome. Loved this movie when I was 12. Still had a good time with it. Probably gonna watch the sequel sometime this month. I saw Nickel Boys. I really am trying to watch as many of the Oscar-nominated films as possible, as I always do. Elwood Curtis's college dreams are shattered when he's sentenced to Nickel Academy, a brutal reformatory in the Jim Crow South. Clinging to his optimistic worldview, Elwood strikes up a friendship with Turner, a fellow black teen who dispenses fundamental tips for survival. Maybe you've heard the buzz about this movie or the marketing, how all of this movie takes place from the POV of the protagonists, and it so rarely breaks from that. Like, most of the time you feel like your head is on the character's shoulders. It's like they replaced the actor's head with a camera somehow. And personally, that just wasn't for me. I unfortunately just like could not really sink into that. A new horror release that I'll talk about out later, Presence did the same thing. And for some reason, I was able to sink into it and like not notice the filmmaking so much. Like by the second act, I was into it with Presence. Nickel Boys, like I never got fully there. It felt a little bit distracting like the entire time. I know that it really worked for a lot of people, and I get it because like the performances are fantastic, the screenplay is fantastic. You can tell just how purposeful all the composition is and everything. To me, that was to its detriment, to the point where just like I felt like I was watching a movie the entire time. That's not gonna be most people's experience with that movie though, so I still highly recommend. I also have the making of Squid Game season 2 listed on Letterboxd. It's not really a making of. It's very surface level. It's more of a season 2 recap than anything else. I want them to get more in depth if they do this again for season 3. Next up, Red Rooms. Okay, I didn't know if I should put this in the non-horror category or the horror category. To me, it felt like a very straightforward thriller. I don't know. It's horrifying. Let's read the synopsis. Kellyanne is obsessed with the high-profile case of a serial killer, and reality blurs with her morbid fantasies. She goes down a dark path to get the missing video of the murder of a young girl. This one was getting a lot of buzz. I was seeing all my friends logging it on Letterboxd. It was getting really high reviews. I was very intrigued with just the little tidbits I was seeing, because I didn't know what this movie was about really until I looked it up on Shudder, and I just like saw the brief synopsis there. And I was like, okay, true crime, all right. But people were acting very, very disturbed by this movie, so naturally I was super intrigued, had to give it a whirl. And it pretty much lives up to the reactions that I was seeing. I didn't think it was a perfect film, but I found it to be a really daring exploration of modern true crime obsession. Nothing about what I saw in this movie felt like a heightened reality. That's just the really sad part of it. I think that there are more lonely, true crime obsessed people out in the world than you or I could ever be aware of. True crime girlies will get millions upon millions of views, and how many of those people have weird stuff going on behind the scenes? That's where my mind was going with this movie, and also just thinking about like isolation of current society. There are quite a few scenes where our lead is working out on her own. She also is like a freelance model. She plays poker online, and that seems to be how she makes the majority of her money. So what do you do when you don't really need your job? You don't have any friends, you do all your workouts from home, or you play, what is it called? Squash? Where you hit the ball at the wall? What do you dedicate your time to? Because that's kind of the world we're living in. That's kind of the world that I live in. I don't need to leave my house to do my job. I need to leave my house to go get groceries, and that's basically it for like bare minimum necessities. Now, luckily for me, I do travel to see my family quite a bit. I have a partner that takes me out a lot, but a lot of people don't have that, and we live in this very just like isolated world. And so this was kind of like a worst case scenario, I feel like, for that circumstance. It basically lived up to the hype. For me, it was like a 4 out of 5. I do highly recommend, but it's heavy. It's a really, really heavy watch. And so was my last non-horror movie of the month. I'm Still Here was the last theatrical non-horror movie that I saw in January. Oh, I'm so sorry. That's time and place. And you did it at my birthday dinner. Okay, I'm Still Here. Let's talk about this tragic film. This movie follows Eunice Palva, who is trying to uncover what happened to her missing husband. He was a former politician, and one day these men, they come into their home and they take him away for questioning. So the movie follows her as not only does she try to figure out what happened to him, but also she's trying to keep her large family together. Fernanda Torres is up for Best Actress, and this movie is also up for Best Picture. I forget what else it's nominated for. I thought that Mikey Madison would have it in the bag. If not her, then maybe it'd be the popularity pick, Cynthia Erivo for Wicked. When I saw this woman's performance, this movie genuinely changed my life. It horrified me to my absolute core. I think it is such a timely piece of art, given the way that our current administration is deploying this like shock doctrine. Even though the subject matter covers something that happened nearly 60 years ago, it feels very present. I was crying through a lot of different points in this movie, and I could have really let loose, but I was watching it in the theater and I just like needed to kind of keep it together in public. It's a really tough watch. I don't think that I could ever watch it again, but I feel like it's been a while since I watched a movie that I just was fully, like, I completely submitted to it. And by that, I just mean that it was so real. Like these people just felt so incredibly real to me. The children's relationship with their mother, her so desperately trying to figure out what happened, and the brave face she puts on in front of her like 6 children. It is so fantastic. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to watch all of the Best Picture noms and then like rank them before the Academy Awards. I really want to, but guess who's never seen Dune? So I need to watch the first one before I can watch the second one. And then I also need to watch The Brutalist. And in total, I think that's like 10 hours of movie that I need to watch. But I just have a sneaking suspicion that this one would be, I don't know, it'd be in my top 3 of all of the Best Picture nominees. I don't know. Just absolute banger quality cinema. And based on true events. Like, I gotta move on, but really, I just was really, really moved. Let's lighten things up, though, with the next category. We just have horror rewatches. First up, we have The Lost Boys. I talked about that in my vampire video. We also watched House of Wax and The Descent together. We did watch-alongs this past month. We watched those in the same week, actually, because they both released in 2005. So I was like, this week's theme is 2005. So clever, right? That was fun. Those are bangers. I also rewatched the 1941 The Wolfman. That was to prepare for Lee Whannell's Wolfman. And I talk about my feelings on that movie in my Wolfman review, so you can check that out. Ooh, and guess who got to see Talk to Me in IMAX? That was sweet, and Scott hadn't seen it. So imagine you've never seen Talk to Me before, and you get to see it for the first time in IMAX. Like, are you joking? We're also going to see Hellraiser this week at the cinema, and he's never seen Hellraiser. I'm so jealous of him. Like, now that they're bringing back all these classic movies to theaters, he's getting to witness them for the first time in theaters. Like, I hate him. I think he also said that it was his favorite horror movie that I've ever shown him, so there's that. Lastly, for rewatches, we have The Lazarus Effect, and I don't really want to talk about this today because it reminded me that I've been wanting to do this forever. I want to make a video of, was this horror movie great, or was I just 12? Because it's tough, and really it is a toss-up. With The Lazarus Effect, I really enjoyed it. Oh, I love trashy bad horror, so I guess that's a little spoiler for that video there, but there is no shortage of movies I need to talk about. So that will hopefully be coming up in the next few months. Now we can get to new watches of old horror, starting with Magic from 1978. Yes, that is a young Anthony Hopkins. How interesting. Anthony Hopkins plays this guy named Corky, who is a failed magician that decides to adopt a new ventriloquist act. Then this movie turns into a weird thing where he starts to pursue his old high school sweetheart because he like fails some mental exam to get a TV show. And then his dummy more or less starts controlling him. It's like a pretty old school take on mental health horror. I didn't think it was very good. I ended up getting rid of my Blu-ray of it, but I gave it 3 stars. Like, it just was worth the watch. It was interesting to see the early career of Anthony Hopkins because he was fantastic. Always has been. Ooh, who was surprised? But you can find this one on Peacock, on Tubi. It's on Amazon Prime right now. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but if you have a fascination with ventriloquism horror or Anthony Hopkins, then it's probably worth a go. Just don't expect to be blown away. Next up, we have Possessor, and this one was like a half rewatch because the year that it came out, I tried to watch it with my father and we just didn't get it. We rented it for like full price and then we ended up turning it off after like 40 minutes. I finished it now though, so don't worry. Teza Voss, an elite corporate assassin, takes control of other people's bodies using brain implant technology to execute high-profile targets. Directed by Brandon Cronenberg, of course, stars the lovely Christopher Abbott, but Andrea Riseborough, she really steals the scene here. It's a weird movie, and I said on Letterboxd that like I was having a bad day and I tried to watch this movie and surprise, like it didn't make me feel better. It's incredibly bleak. It is about the soul-sucking nature of just corporate life, basically. It's a very literal take on selling your mind, body, and soul even to the company you work for. Super interesting movie. I now own it. I would definitely rewatch it. I don't like it. And believe me, I am big on using language properly. I am big on saying exactly what I mean. Sometimes it's not about whether or not you like a movie. Sometimes it's about, do I want to watch something really thought-provoking? With this one too, it's like, am I in the mood for something really fucking bleak? You know, it's just not not all about like or dislike. I'm glad that I'm on the train now, because when it came out, I don't know, I was younger and just like didn't fully get it. I'm here now. I'm with you now. Next up is Clown. I finally watched this movie. I have been aware of it for so long, probably since I was a teenager, and I'm glad I finally watched it. This movie follows a man who moonlights as a party clown for children when one day he puts on a new clown outfit and he cannot take it off. This one is also quite bleak. It's a depressing movie, and the bummer of it all is that this could have been as iconic as Terrifier. It came out just 2 years before the first movie. It looks like it's of a similar budget, even though I'm pretty sure that Terrifier was probably produced for far less. Yeah, Clown was produced apparently for $1.5 million, and I'm like, where? Also, would you believe it's directed by the same guy that did the whole Tom Holland Spider-Man trilogy? Anyway, this could have been as iconic as Terrifier, I think, if some of these supporting actors were a little bit better. I'm sorry. That's like my least favorite thing to critique, because generally it's something else that got lost in the sauce. But I have to be honest here, the acting was not good from some people. Because you know what? I could excuse a lot of the other stuff. It looks very low budget. Okay, the camera work is not great. Guess what? Doesn't always matter to me. They use CGI for some effects here and there, but it just simply was like not enough to be really egregious, because a lot of the practical effects and the makeup were fantastic. Thought the acting of the lead, our Miss Clown, Miss Thang, I thought that he was awesome. It is unfortunately some of the supporting acting that really drags it down and took me out. That's not to say that it isn't a little bit of a cult classic in its own right. I never hear any of my mutuals talking about it. It's tough for something like that to live on when it doesn't hit just the right note. So I do kind of want to wake that up a little bit. Clown is worth watching. Next up we have Daybreakers, and I won't get into this one too much because it did also make my vampire list, or I think it was an honorable mention. But something that I didn't mention there was just how insane some of Willem Dafoe's dialogue was.
Is this place safe? Being human in a world full of vampires is about as safe as barebacking a $5 whore.
Yeah, he says that and more in Daybreakers. I would definitely give it a shot. I might have cherry-picked the most insane line from him, so don't expect too much more. But that movie is just nuts. It's absolutely unhinged, and I really enjoyed myself. Blade also made the list, so I'm not going to talk about it here. Next up is Battle Royale, which I gave an entire dedicated review over on the Patreon as well. I actually compared it to the Hunger Games as well, so it's kind of a 2-for-1. It was both a review and then also a comparison. That was fun. Love Battle Royale. Oh my god, I think it's almost perfect. And I watched the director's cut, by the way. Ooh, several vampire movies that did not make the list. First up, we have Nosferatu the Vampire, which I believe is the 1979 remake. This one's got great atmosphere. I'm gonna give you just this little bite-sized look at some of the visuals, and of course it also stars Isabelle Adjani. Icon, there is no doubt about that, and she does great here. I had to watch a weird English dubbed version because I could not find the original German version. But for me, the most egregious problem about this movie was not that, but rather that I was quite bored. That was something I learned about myself this past month, is that I'm so picky when it comes to the more classic Dracula adaptations. I talked about it a couple months ago that I did not like Francis Ford Coppola's take, only because it wasn't what I expected. I think on a rewatch, once I know that it is quite campy, that I will like it more, but that's besides the point. I'm not a big Nosferatu girl. Like, I don't know. On paper, I should be, but like, I'm just not. Same thing with the original Dracula from 1931. Oh my god, that movie is so boring. Once again, I said it about The Wolfman. I think that a lot of classics are unfairly named masterpieces when they're not. Not every classic is a masterpiece. Like, can that be okay? I thought that I would at least be really hypnotized by Bela Lugosi's performance, and like, not really. I need to start getting into some of the sequels or something. I have a nice little physical media pack of like the first 5 Dracula movies or something. But anyway, next up we have Queen of the Damned. This one also did not make my top 10. I didn't enjoy this movie very much. Somebody told me that it's meant to be basically a sequel to Interview with the Vampire, which I get that. The lead guy, his name is Lestat, I think. But in many ways, it is more of just like a spiritual sequel. The only parts that I enjoyed were when they were playing music on the stage and crazy vampire stuff was was happening during their performance. I liked the music. I was there for that. I was there for Aaliyah. I mean, the makeup and the costuming was really great. I didn't find anything about the story interesting or even memorable. Like, I can't really remember what happens in that movie. That was one of the vampire movies that kind of just passed in the night. I was watching so many of them, so it really needed to do quite a bit more to, like, stand out to me. Because all the rest of them, A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, Humanist Vampire Seeking Consenting Suicidal Person, Only Lovers Left Alive, and From Dusk Till Dawn, they all made the list, or at least an honorable mention. So again, check that out if you want to hear me talk a lot more about vampire movies. I finally watched The Descent Part 2. We did a watch along together. People tried to warn me how bad that movie was. And then I also had some people telling me that they actually kind of liked the sequel and they just were really curious to see how I would react. Poop. Yeah, poop. Oh, Haunted Hippie, elaborate on that. No. The re-upload of that watch-along will be available to my Tier 3 patrons in the next couple weeks. Find out what the hell I'm talking about over there, I guess. Finally, my last new watch of an old horror movie would be Howl. Guess who is entering her werewolf cinema era? I'm gonna try to release my top 10 werewolf movies video, if not this month, then probably in March. I've got a lot to get through. So, ticket collector Joe oversees the last train out of London on a dark and stormy night when suddenly the train screeches to a halt in a forest after hitting something on the tracks. Sorry that I spoiled that this was a werewolf movie, but it's called Howl. And also, I feel like, because I watched it on Tubi, I think the synopsis on Tubi did spoil that. Oh, and it's on the poster. Look, there's a giant werewolf face on the poster. It's fine. It's fine. So with that synopsis, I'm sold, right? Like, I'm kind of stoked to check this out. I'm like, how have I not heard of this? It also stars Shauna McDonald from The Descent, icon. But guess who doesn't really get much to do at all in Howl? How do you watch The Descent as a director, as a creative, and you have the honor of casting Shauna McDonald, and then you give her pretty much nothing to do? She's basically just woman on train. This is the most by the numbers, trapped in a single location survival horror movie with group of diverse characters dealing with inexplicable horror. A lot of the time you can just swap out the location and the inexplicable horror and it's always just like the same movie. So this time they're on a train and they're dealing with werewolves. It is boring. It is so by the numbers. Like, if I had never seen one of those kinds of movies before, if I had never seen like 47 Meters Down or just stuff like that, then maybe I would have thought this movie was awesome. Again, if I was 12, maybe I would have thought this movie's awesome. It's not. It's lame. I don't think it's worth checking out. So spoilers, that one's not making the top 10. It is finally time to get into new releases though, starting with The Damned. This was oddly the movie that was chosen to be dumped in the first week of January. We'll get into why that is confusing in just a minute though. Fighting for survival at an isolated fishing outpost, Eva and her crew are cursed after making the choice to not help a sinking ship off the coast. Facing the consequences, a darkness consumes them all, creating chaos and death at every turn. This is not your traditional January first week dump. It confounds me why this was the choice for that when we had The Wolfman. I'm sorry, let me not disparage another film, that's not necessary. The Damned is an exquisitely made film. It's extremely competent, looks gorgeous, it is shot on location. I mean, you saw the visuals. The acting is also fantastic. Was fully sold by all of that. The ambiance, the people. The reason why this movie lacks a bit though is just that it is extremely generic. They have this gorgeous location and super unique setup, only to not really do anything with it. It becomes this very kind of traditional haunting situation. And the third time that I saw that soggy looking ghost facing the corner and like there was suspenseful music waiting for him to like turn around, I was like, hey, that is about 2 times too many. Maybe you could have done this sort of generic scare setup one time and I would have been forgiving, but they do it at least 3 times. And at that point, it just gets annoying. It's grating. It's like, okay, there's no more clever scares up your sleeve, really. And then the ending is just kind of bullshit. I'm not going to elaborate because I felt like it was worth watching for me, especially because entering January, it's just always kind of a bummer because you're like, when is the next time I'm gonna see a good movie at the theater? That's not entirely true because a lot of the Oscar movies are in theaters. I just mean in terms of like 2025 releases. It was a 3-star. I didn't give it the stamp of approval of a little heart on Letterboxd, but it was worth watching at the theater. I don't know if it would be at home. Some people liked it a lot more than I did though, so it's probably worth a shot. Oh, guess who included Salem's Lot from last year in this category? category. Sorry, it's still new to me. It only released like 4 months ago, so I was like, fuck it. It's probably the last new release of 2024 that I'm gonna watch, so I'm just gonna include it in my new release section. I won't linger though. There's not much to get into. I thought that it was just like really generic. I think the last 15-20 minutes are super fun, and I was like, where was this the entire movie? Really liked the ending of it, so I ended up giving the movie 3 stars in totality, but it wasn't good. I felt like the characters were super shallow, wasn't into any of them, didn't care. Some people do claim the movie to be a little bit underrated, and just based on the ending, I can see that, because if you can get swept up by that and like you're carried by your emotions more than anything during a viewing experience, you'd probably leave the movie thinking it was pretty good, but I didn't forget the first like hour and a half of the movie that I sat through. So yeah, no, not for me. Now, Wolfman and Presence, I don't want to get into too much because Wolfman, I gave an entire solo review on this channel. Presence, I spoke with my dad for about 10 minutes, I think, in our last episode together, so we kind of co-reviewed it. Presence, I liked more than majority of people, so don't take my recommendation too seriously here. I'm kind of in the minority of being someone that did really enjoy like the drama of the family. That kept me engaged, and I felt fully entertained by the entirety of the film. I think it definitely has its problems. It is an experimental film after all, so on a lot of cinematic levels, it didn't entirely work for me. But like I said earlier, the experimental nature of it and the POV filmmaking of it from the perspective of this Presence, somehow that worked for me when Nickel Boys didn't. I don't know. I thought that it was really weird in the first act because they would cut to black instead of just maintaining it as a oneer or just doing direct cuts. And at first I thought that that was weird, and then by the end of the movie, didn't notice it anymore. And I was like, oh wow, I really just kind of fell into that. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on. On a lot of like writing levels, it kind of fails because there are points of drama with the family that are brought up in the first act that never come back. And I'm like, hey, I wanted to know about that. So it's got its problems, but I was really entertained. I think a lot of people were super let down because it was marketed as like the scariest movie of the year for some reason. It is barely a horror movie, so don't get that twisted going into it. Manage your expectations, and maybe you'll be entertained like me. I don't know. Overall, like a weirdly good month for horror, considering that it was January. I mean, Wolfman was a flop, and then next up I have Grafted, which I also didn't really like, but just overall, like, I don't know the last time we've had a January that was so kind of delightfully average. Usually it's stinky. Usually January is pew pew, stinky, smells bad. But anyway, Grafted, this was a Shudder release. An ambitious yet socially inexperienced exchange student strives to elevate her status in pursuit of popularity. This movie is basically like American Mary meets The Substance. And I've also seen other comparisons to May, but I wouldn't know about that. I haven't seen it. I know. I've been told that I would like May. I'll watch it soon. It was sent to me on physical media, so I'll get there. But in my opinion, like, this movie was watchable. I wouldn't say that I got bored, but so many of the story beats were just so familiar. I just didn't need it. I think that I would have been more satisfied if I had rewatched American Mary or if I had rewatched The Substance. I feel like that is a better use of your time, but it's serviceable. It depends what kind of person you are. Do you feel like absorbing these themes from something tried and true, or are you willing to see a slightly different, more mediocre take? I feel like it's kind of the worst thing that I can say when I'm very just on the movie. Like, didn't regret watching it, didn't really gain anything from it, so I don't know. It's something to watch on Shudder. I don't know. Try it out. I don't know. Luckily, I don't have to leave you on such a lukewarm take because the final new release of the month that I watched was Companion. Though I did just give this movie an entire dedicated review, so I don't think I really need to tell you about it here. It was just a good time. I'm still in the camp of strongly recommending. I'm drinking in all the love that I'm seeing for it online and on Letterboxd. I think that we're gonna get a lot of Iris costumes this Halloween, and I'm here for it. I'm excited for it. I'm excited to see the girlies dressed in 60s pink checkered stuff covered in blood. That'll be a happy day in my book. Oh, but that's gonna do it. January was a crazy month, but for me personally, it got lost in a lot of great cinema. So there's that silver lining. But like I said at the beginning, no more January. We're done. Next, we can just jump right into February next year. I'm just kidding. I think, or I hope that January next year will look better than January this year. Stay hopeful, stay positive, stay joyful. It's the watch watching movies, it's the listening to music, it's the dancing, it's the spending time with friends, it's creating community that gets us through hard times. So I sincerely hope that you're well. If you want to see more content from me, I have already shouted out the Patreon a million times, but you know, ton of bonus content over there. I also have a second channel, and that's mainly where I talk about physical media, and I also post a good amount of travel content. It's my hobby channel, so sometimes I'll even talk about non-horror movies over there. Basically just whatever I want, so yeah, check it out. I would also strongly urge you to check out my Instagram because I recently posted the teaser trailer for my short horror film coming out next week. Oh, I'm so excited for you guys to finally see it. Oh, finally! Liked is premiering on Valentine's Day, so yes, I will remind you. But more than anything, I just hope that you enjoyed this video and that I catch you in the next one. Bye.